Seems like a good time to start.
All right. Welcome everybody to our Tempest Community Exchange. First, like to run through a quick couple housekeeping items. If anyone has any questions at all, please reach out to Aaron on our team, or you can facilitate kind of a chat through the platform. Don't hesitate to ask any questions. And then as well, if you have to kind of jump in and out throughout the day, all content will be recorded and available live in our new online community forum as well. So I just wanted to kind of throw those two things out there. If you're ever having challenges kind of navigating through everything, just click on the sessions tab and you'll have a link there to kind of jump into any kind of Zoom, and you should be good to go from there. And with that, we're going to jump into a quick kind of intro. First and foremost, I've had a bunch of people ask me what's going on with the community exchange? Like, why are you guys doing it? The main thing is, over the past year, we've all definitely experienced a lot of Zooms. I was just chatting with Adam and Jack here. I think Adam had mentioned he's done far more than 100 over the past year. I'm sure Jack as well. So in some sense, I think a lot of us are very much ready for face-to-face. We're ready to kind of move forward and no more Zooms. At the same time, there's definitely some benefits and value. So for what we were doing and kind of brainstorming is thinking about what were the good parts of this past year. And one of the big things was the speed of being able to kind of spin something up in the ease. It's very low stress, casual. You can kind of jump in and out of it. There's not necessarily the demand to be physically somewhere for an entire day. So we thought that that was a good benefit. And also from our perspective, we have a lot to share over the next couple months about what we've been up to for the past year. We've purposefully kind of sat back and been more of a supportive mode versus very sales and kind of outbound mode with everything going on. But we also feel as things start moving and opening up, we've been very, very busy, and leading up to Tourism Academy in October, we have a lot to talk about. So we thought this is a great kind of platform to do so, and to make it in a very casual, easy way. We can have our friends like Adam and Jack join us, talk about things we feel like are important, and also make it very interactive and collaborative. So one of the main focuses for today as well is we expect a lot of Q&A. We hope to have people ask questions. We also hope that it kind of drives and stimulates the conversation for us to create the next one. Our expectation is to kind of spin up these maybe 4 or 5 times a year. Probably a couple week warnings, I guess, on them. But again, if you can make a couple sessions, great. Make the whole day, no big deal. It's also something we've kind of realized that the virtual is very, very good for strengthening and keeping on existing relationships. Maybe new relationships, not as much. And I think that maybe that's some things we might touch on in the conversation today. So without further ado, I want to jump right into it. Some quick introductions. Joining us today, Gregg Shapiro, our President and Chief Creative Officer here at Tempest. I know Gregg doesn't like to talk about himself too much, but he is the driving force behind all of our creative and digital initiatives that we've been doing for the past 10 years in this industry. Also joining us is Jack Johnson. He's the Chief Advocacy Officer at Destinations International. And I'm just really excited from a personal perspective here to have Adam and Jack, because from my perspective, they are the two thought leaders in this industry and really influential for everything we do here at Tempest as we kind of look forward. So I'm super stoked to have you guys here today. And so Jack and his work on kind of transitioning and transforming the conversation around destination organizations to be a shared value in the community, it's instrumental on not only where we are today, but where we're going and the health and strength. And with that, we also have Adam joining us. And for those who don't know Adam, we like to call him Adam the Axeman Sax. You see him there with the guitar. He and Gregg might play a little music for us today. He is the president of Tourism Economics and Oxford Economics Company. Adam is the authority on measuring economic impact from visitor activity in tourism, full stop. His work has provided the foundation for billions, that's with a B, of dollars of capital investment by the largest hotel companies, real estate developers, and investors around the world. I mean, there's nobody with more knowledge and expertise on the numbers and data in tourism than Adam. And on the flip side, from Jack, there's nobody smarter from a persuasive and emotional connection and how to communicate with the stakeholders. So I think to have those two perspectives kind of come together this morning, I'm super excited about. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of open up the conversation today with the last year's been, challenging to say the least. A lot of change. We've seen accelerations in every single industry. We've kind of felt our industry move forward very, very fast. Things that we've talked about happened really quickly. It's going to have a compounding effect over the next couple of years. That being said, like, what are, in your feeling, Jack, like the biggest kind of takeaways from like what we've seen, what we're gonna see? What would you say from your perspective are the most important takeaways?
The biggest, I mean, we spent here at DI at least half of the year last year trying to figure out what were going to be the key changes that the pandemic was going to bring. And in the end, it came up with zero. The big impact of the pandemic isn't that it's changing things, it's that it's changing things really, really quickly. So it's basically accelerating everything. So whether it's the need for the destination organization to be involved in, what is the safety regulations of a town or destination that should have been doing that already. They have to be the one-stop shop for planners because someone has to know everything about safety in every one of those destinations. That seems like new, but it's not. It really goes back to a lot of stuff that worked before that. The biggest takeaway, when I made the speech at the annual convention in 2019 about becoming a community shared value, we figured it would take about 4 to 10 years for destination organizations to do that. If you are not halfway down that road already, you're way behind, because I think now it's just a couple of years. The ability to reshape, refocus, reorientate the destination organization to a much broader civic role, I think is probably the single biggest takeaway. It can move quickly. The other thing is, hopefully everyone understands how important we are. One of the best lines I like to use, and it's one of the many lines I've stolen from Adam, is that there is no recovery without a tourism industry recovery. Unless tourism and travel and meetings comes back, everyone should understand the importance of that. And the importance to come back quickly is really dependent upon that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fantastic. And I think I think what you're saying, you were kind of thinking 4 to 10 years for everybody to transform. And many people had 4 months to do it, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've talked a lot about, whether you're a destination management or destination development, stuff like that. All the concepts we're really talking about have been around and talked about for like last 10 years or whatever. I mean, it's not new stuff, with the exception maybe of focusing on the residents, and reason why we do it all. But if you did not pivot during the pandemic to, if nothing else, to help save your restaurants, to save as many of the local businesses that you could, that are kind of your partners, kind of help define what the brand of your destination is. If you hadn't made that shift, if you weren't sitting down with the city or the county or the state in terms of recovery strategy, if you weren't just being a pest in terms of, can we get regulations on when meetings can happen? Can we do small meetings? If you just weren't in their face this past year, you've missed this fabulously great opportunity, because never more. And it's ironic, given the financial straits that most of our members are in, the smaller staffs, the having to do fewer things with fewer people. Ironic that this is absolutely the great, in my opinion, the great opportunity to like slingshot yourself into the future.
Yeah, one thing that has come up with quite a few conversations I've had over the past few months is the amount of times that, whether it's the executives or other key people in the organizations, they're sitting at the table with people that they don't normally do. Which, anytime you do that and you can communicate effectively your value proposition, it's huge. So from my perspective, that seems to be a very big opportunity is now you're talking to other people in the community that maybe you weren't talking to before. And I think you made a joke a couple of years ago that, having to explain to your family members what you do for a living is a really bad thing. And so if anything in these past 12 months, if destination organizations, and I kind of catch myself now just saying that, destination organization versus saying destination marketing, destination management, CBB, just kind of very broad term. If you're in the room now with new people, that's an opportunity to talk about exactly what a destination organization does and how important it is. And from a recovery perspective, it's like you said, the investment into tourism is what will drive that, full stop. I mean, that's not up for debate. So.
Right. Talking to Kayleen in Bentonville, she was someone who was already always at that table in terms of the civic discussion. What has happened out of the pandemic is now her communications person is on a joint call with all the communications people. Now they've created this once a month check-in with local businesses, and they're spreading that out among their staff. So even if you've kind of like made that step and your CEO is kind of involved in that economic strategy or whatever, or at least the scheduling of how the city or a county operates, the fact that a whole slew of people within a destination organization are now hopefully connecting with peers and really integrating yourself totally into the fabric of the civic fabric within a destination. That's really exciting.
Sorry, having the dog bark. This is the 2021, right? Yeah. So Adam,
I dread a package showing up from UPS or something that'll just set the dog off like that.
Yeah, isn't it great though how these kind of things used to kind of shake you up or used to care a couple of years ago, and now it's just everyone's kind of in it together. Adam, I mean, from your perspective, like, I guess kind of talking about like the positives and everything we've seen over the past 12 months, like what are some of the biggest kind of takeaways you've seen, and is it kind of that same kind of acceleration trend that kind of Jack noted?
Yeah, I mean, essentially you're asking me about the positives of the last year, which is something that would have been maybe hard to reflect on maybe 6 months ago, but I'm happy to reflect on it now. I think one of the biggest challenges over the past year has been to parse out like what is part of a temporary or cyclical change that we're experiencing versus what is a sea change, like what is moving, as Jack said, like an acceleration into an entirely different state of play. And I think we got to be really careful in like not assigning kind of sea change, new normal criteria to certain things that likely are not permanent, because I've seen this over the last 25 years plenty of times where a crisis hits and everyone's like, oh, this changes everything, like forever. And those predictions have not aged well. We saw it after the great financial crisis, meetings will never come back. We saw it after 9/11, people won't travel by air the same way they did. And we've seen it in other pandemics in other parts of the world. But one of the things, I think the learnings from that is that human behavior, there's a certain fundamental permanence to humanity that will drive travel, and it will drive the desire. Well, certainly, let me just say this. I mean, if there's a new normal on the leisure side, is that people love their vacations more than ever. And so when I would say, like, what's the positive on the leisure side, it's like you've never had a more loyal, dedicated market for leisure travel than you will have, moving forward from this point on, because people had something taken away from them that they previously took for granted, right? And so that I think that's going to drive the leisure market in a substantial way. Now, it's going to be among a more finite set of destinations over the next, say, 6 months as urban markets continue to struggle to the benefit of outdoor-based destinations. But nevertheless, the fundamental driver of what motivates people to travel for vacations is like stronger than ever. In China, they have a character that describes what they call revenge tourism, and I think it's a fantastic concept that this sort of like, you took that away from me, the pandemic, you took that away from me, and I'm going to get you back by traveling. That's the basic essence of it as I understand it. And
I want to get that tattoo. I like that.
Yeah, right? It's a great tattoo. Now, but then let's think about the corporate and the group side. I think that's where we might want to be more reflective about, what has changed and what's changed in a more, say, semi-permanent way. We've certainly managed to leverage technology in a way that we never thought we would before. The funny thing is, honestly, 18 months ago, we did something called conference calls. Remember conference calls? Now there's all Teams or Zoom, right? Or whatever platform. And so that's changed. I think, without video, it feels like it's, cheaper. But I think that what I see as sort of the acceleration into a new normal is not that we won't want to meet together. In fact, I think similarly, there will be an increased appetite for that, but that we will meet more frequently with these other platforms as sort of the interims. Because the only reason, and I can't make this point passionately enough, the only reason that virtual meetings have worked over the last year is because they're built on a foundation of in-person meetings. Mm-hmm. The only reason the five of us can have a somewhat natural conversation is because we know each other, right? The only reason you're not wondering, why is Adam sitting there with a guitar? Is he going to play it? You're not worried about that. I probably will, But we know each other. There's a comfort level, and it's what has created community. It's the same thing. DI's annual conference had, Jack, you had record attendance virtually, right? Would you have gotten that sort of interest if there wasn't a community that is Destinations International among all the destination organizations? No, right? We know each other, and there's a certain gravitational pull toward being together. But that relational equity does not last forever, right? We need to replenish it meeting in person. So I think, Jack, I think your next annual is going to have incredibly strong attendance in person, right? People missed it and they know that they need it. So I think in that sense, I'm not worried about a new normal in terms of pulling away from in-person meetings, but I just recognize that there's going to be a lot more meetings. The introduction of hybrid, right? That's going to add to the audience, not take away from it, and certainly adding to the frequency. So those are the things on the market level that I'm seeing as, in a sense, positive.
Yeah, I would agree. Our CEO Summit registrations for in-person are pacing at a pace that we've never had before for an in-person meeting. I mean, literally overnight, we're over 100. And I suspect the only thing really holding us back are just local safety regulations and such, and not knowing exactly where we're going to be in July. But yeah, I would agree I think we're in for one of the biggest travel booms, because I think people do miss about meeting. People talk about not being together, how much they miss, and it's in our nature. I mean, travel's in our DNA. Meeting is what we like to do. That said, this platform that we're using now, I find incredibly useful for work-related stuff, and I think it's a helpful tool. But yeah, it doesn't replace the in-person convention. The hybrid event, what I loved about that was the comment that I heard over and over and over was I finally got to share this event with more people on my team because we couldn't send everyone before. And that's a very attractive element of hybrid. What worries me about hybrid is it's costly. Doing hybrid by itself is cheaper because you save on food and beverage and stuff. Doing a convention is cheaper because you don't have to do the technology. If we can get those hybrid meetings a little more cost effective, yeah, I think those play into the future.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the virtual will make the in-person better because we will have a more consistent communication stream with the communities that we all build. One thing I'm kind of curious to see is in corporate travel, I don't think sales, like new business development, will be hit as much because, again, you can't create new relationships in the same way virtual. You can strengthen existing very well, I feel like. Again, like Adam, I think that's a great analogy though, like the equity, you drain it after a while, you need to replenish it. I'm curious about some of the kind of corporate travel to on-sites, you know, in company and things like that. I'm curious, like, if that changes a bit. And then, you know, seeing kind of where that trend is. Adam, do you have any thoughts on that, on just like, you know, the non-convention type of travel?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, right now, GBTA, their survey of corporate travel buyers is indicating only, I think it's like 21% right now are saying that they're expecting to resume, you know, regular travel within the next 3 months. So we're certainly, you know, it's not a near-term recovery for corporate travel. And I do think that in some ways what we've, you know, there are a lot of meetings that probably will move to virtual on sort of that transient business travel side. And I agree, Alex, you know, there's always going to be a competitive advantage to in-person. And so in that sense, sales is probably likely to, you know, to continue to be strong sales type travel. But other internal meetings and those things, I think that those are going to take a hit for a good while, you know, because alternatives are seen as, well, maybe not as effective, but they're certainly more efficient, more cost effective. But that said, if I can just like put one more layer on it, the incentive travel side looks actually to be coming back pretty quickly as far as planning and expectations among incentive travel buyers and sellers. So that part of, you know, rewarding employees with incentive travel and these sorts of meetings where you're taking your team somewhere, you know, for team building and the like. That I think also is something that is going to survive and prosper.
Wondering if with office footprints, which I think will not go away but will shrink, the hotel now has this whole new revenue sector because that's where you're going to do those team building meetings, or that's where you're going to do your all staff or whatever.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is that it remains to be seen, but, you know, the office space is not dead by any means, but it's certainly going to be transformed. And I think expectations of in office has changed. You know, I don't buy the office space is dead. I don't buy all companies will go remote by any means. I think that that's kind of, as Adam says, like those predictions will look pretty bad in a couple of years. That being said, most companies are going to be a lot more progressive in their remote policies. And I think expectations around, you know, when you need to be in the office versus out and be a lot more flexible is going to be the norm. Organizations like ours have always kind of been like that, so it's not going to be too crazy. But what we found is, yeah, most of our team wants to be in the office. You know, they want to have face-to-face interactions. That being said, people want to have that freedom. But as the larger companies who have these giant footprints, they may do more travel now to facilitate some in-person stuff if they don't have those same footprints. So yeah, that might drive some business that maybe we're not seeing right now, which could definitely be interesting. So kind of moving on to that, from a kind of organizational structure and like what a destination organization looks like, this is kind of a really fun one to kind of think about, because again, kind of going back to the opportunity in front of us and an opportunity for a destination organization to really do well in the next couple years, it's not going to be the same destination organization, right? Like it's kind of like that change that we've all been looking at has happened so quickly. So what are some of the things that you think will happen, Jack, and you're seeing happen, and how, you know, restructuring, of course, unfortunately, many organizations have had to, you know, shrink down size. They'll be rebuilding themselves up over the next couple of years. Like where do you see kind of that transition, or like what that structure looks like?
It'll be interesting to watch, because I think we've had fewer people working on stuff, which we're trying to do as much as we used to do before, but we can't. So hopefully this has forced people into this concept of fewer, better things. So we're going to do fewer things. We're going to focus on what really makes the difference. Hopefully they're bringing back if I was running a destination organization, I would have someone who can deal with advocacy and community outreach. I think that's a critical position. I still think that trends of everything going digital and that digital conversion have just also increased dramatically. I'd want someone who understands data. Competence in those three areas are, I think, pretty big. In terms of traditional, like on the meeting side, I think I would staff up first with services as opposed to general sales. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail over that one. But I actually think that it's the servicing of existing clients that is really a critical element, particularly if meetings are going to have to at least be hybrid for a while or remote for a while. If the patchwork of safety and regulations still remains, as we learn more about variants of the disease, as we learn more about, I just read today that someone in China finally admitted that their vaccine is nowhere near as effective as the ones that are being used in the West. There's a whole bunch of issues out there that I think require servicing a meeting as opposed to selling a meeting. So that's where I would see those three areas probably coming back faster.
So that's services and community.
Yeah, meeting services, anyone in digital marketing, digital conversion. People are, I mean, that's basically the trends that came out of the DNEX study 2 years ago. I mean, I've always talked about 21 being the most important one that we're going to release July at our annual convention. I still think it's a very important report, but somehow I think you'll be able to look at the 19 report and the 21 report as part one and part two. Part one identifying trends that were coming, and part two will be what accelerated and what really took to the top. So digital, I still think is going to be huge. And again, that advocacy position, that community relations position, stakeholder engagement, anything along those lines.
So how many, and I guess it's hard to say, off the top of your head, but I mean, how many destinations right now do you feel like are thinking about that from a staffing and organizational or focus? Or is that something that isn't necessarily a new position, but maybe the kind of membership team kind of starts morphing into that? Or do you see that as an entirely new skill set? Or how do you see that moving?
On the community outreach, the destination management, the advocacy piece, I'm seeing that showing up as identifiable portfolios. I'm still seeing way too few employees with that as their portfolio being hired, but I'm seeing it more and more. Ideally, what I'm coming across though is that, okay, that's now been written into my job description, and that's part of what it is I do.
And then the question is, how do I do it?
Mm.
Yeah, and that's something that we've been thinking a lot lately about, obviously more focused on the digital and the digital transformation is, from our perspective, like we want all of our clients to be digital experts. It makes, we are experts at the same time. It makes a working relationship much, much better. We want that fluency necessarily, like across the board. We've always been very clear that we feel like the destination organization is the authoritative source digitally for all information about the destination, full stop. Google can't scale, Facebook can't scale. The DMO is the only one that's going to be in every single location. So we're really happy to see that trend going, but I'm also thinking from kind of the other positions within an organization, how kind of we see the organization, I guess, morph and evolve. And I also am very biased, but I think that a destination organization is also one of the most fun, great, fantastic places to work in any place. And it's a huge career opportunity for young people coming out of school, people transitioning from the hotel sector and other sectors. So this is always something I've been very kind of fascinated with, not necessarily what Tempest does, but it's also very exciting as we also talk to a lot of our younger team and we see more younger people coming in. So it's kind of neat to kind of think about that, like that skill set development, career development, and like that community advocacy and that kind of piece of it being part of, maybe existing team members or recruiting for those people as people kind of build up the team.
Yeah, certainly passion is probably the one value that cuts across every destination organization. And that is I've never seen such a concentration of passionate people about what it is they do in any industry that I've touched on, like I do in this one. Everyone, just 99.9% are passionate about the industry, passionate about travel, and passionate about their destination. And that's exciting to kind of pivot that from not just interacting with visitors, but also interacting with the residents. I think is a huge development, and I think hopefully we'll see that starting to reflect not only in the positions that are hired, but kind of cross-pollination with other positions. I mean, I think we agree on this. The website is such an amazing opportunity, not just for visitors, but for residents. I think the data and how it's being portrayed, I'll give a plug to Adam. His Symphony product is absolutely stunningly beautiful, and I think everyone should have something like that, because it gives you for the first time the tools of the website, the communication channels that you use, social media channels that you use, the data that you have, the expertise that you're bringing to the table. Really, I think allows you for the first time to kind of lean into this role of being, a major force, civic force in your community. You are the one that has information that others don't. I point to Chicago. I mean, David Chakowski is actually driving a lot of economic projections that are being used by the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago. The ability to have this information and to, instead of using it to defend your position or defend your funding, but actually step into a civic role, put it out there. Put your website out there, own your website. Yes, it's biased because you live there, but it means you're also the expert. Just really step into this role of, we're a destination organization. We're not just proud of that, not just loving what we do, but it's actually an incredibly important role within the civic structure. Destination, as we said, destination promotion is just as important as a public need as healthcare and education and utilities and streets and sanitation, et cetera, et cetera. You don't move forward in this interconnected economy of ours without that.
Yeah, we feel very strongly that, the destination organization as kind of the hub of the community has to have the best website in the community. And then kind of handing it off to you, Adam, it's also safe to say that destination organizations should have the best data, right? So with that, like what kind of data should a destination organization be focused on? And should a destination organization have all the data? Should they be the ones? Does there need to be a data scientist at every DMO? That seems a little lofty, but what are your thoughts on the kind of use of data and where that's going, and what a destination organization needs to be thinking about now, as well as the next couple of years?
I have a lot of thoughts about data. I think about that all the time. I think it's, you think about acceleration in this time, the concept that Jack introduced, and one of the areas that we've talked about a lot is that space of community engagement, and whether that's advocacy or that's engagement with partners. It's very clear to me from talking to our clients is that their focus on community engagement has been heightened. A larger set of resources dedicated to engaging with their community. And let me share something with you on my screen, because I think it'll just help just for communicate. The first thing that I think is really important is just and this will relate to data in a second, is identifying who is your community, right? And it really is like the community is a diverse concept, right? It's your board, it's your membership, but it begins to go out from there, right? Maybe it's your convention center, certainly the industry, your hotels and attractions, but then it goes to government, policymakers. I think the media is an important part of your stakeholder community, because they become the megaphone to other parts of your community, including residents. And so with that as I think a heightened need for engagement, because this has been in some sense an existential crisis for destinations. right? What are we going to look like on the other side of this? We need the support of our communities more than ever as destination organizations. So engaging with them is critical. What we have focused on as an organization for tourism economics is how can DMOs use data for community engagement. And I think that if this is a heightened need, I think that DMOs are also facing a heightened challenge. And that heightened challenge is that data kind of looks like this. It's just, while the need to carefully communicate and advocate for the destination organization has increased, well, certainly the amount of data available has increased and continues to increase, perhaps at an exponential rate. And so then that becomes a growing challenge. How does that then get organized? It's like, you're sort of like, you're looking at this data and just a mess, and you feel like you're like on the crazy train, And that's like your data world. And meanwhile, you're trying to get something that's more like, classical music. Anyway, like you'd love it to be efficient and elegant and inform decisions and communicate with your partners, right? And I think that is the big challenge. So what does this mean for destination organizations in terms of their resources? I think that in one sense, it means that what we're seeing is DMOs are needing to make decisions about, what do they do internally versus what do they get support for? And Jack, thanks for mentioning Symphony. I'll only say that that's one of several options that DMOs can use to better manage, process, and report, analyze their data. But I think it's critical because what DMOs can then do is two things. One, they can be the North Star for what's going on in the industry, right? So whatever your stakeholder group is, from board out to industry, to the media, and everyone in between, you become that guiding light for what's going on, right? What's going on with the recovery? What's going on with different industry segments? And what does performance look like in the industry? But then the second category that we've seen as a growing importance, and I would say a really big opportunity for destination organizations is to communicate that organization's KPIs. So not just what's going on in the industry, but what's going on in terms of what the DMO is accomplishing. And so whether those be web analytics or social or other measures that you're tracking on the sales side, being able to elegantly, consistently, on a regular rhythm, communicate that, not just wait for your annual report or your key meetings, but on a regular cadence, be able to communicate, this is what we are accomplishing on your behalf, then I think you've accomplished two things in community engagement. You've established yourself as the true expert that understands what's going on, and you've established yourself as a catalyst for economic development. And that just touches all the bases. And I think that data is one of the most powerful ways that you can do that, because it's all available. It's just a matter of using it smartly, reporting it smartly, pushing it out in ways that are easily digestible and tell stories. So that's my my rather very thoughtfully considered position on data. I just think it's more important than ever.
So it looks like we've got a pretty good chat started up here, and there's a good question here that I'd like to relay and get your take on this, both Adam and Jack. So how do you recommend destination organizations navigating serving residents while also serving visitors? That's, typically it's been something that's been kind of a difficult line to walk. So I'd be curious to hear your take on that as well.
First, I should jump on the opening that Adam gave me and say, yes, there are other people out there. Zartico is doing some interesting work. Clarity of Place is doing some interesting work in terms of using data to interact with stakeholders and community. There's a few others, all who are good partners of Destinations International. How do I recommend destination organizations navigate serving residents? And we're going to release actually a roadmap that kind of walks you through from a value-based approach in terms of how you begin to interact with your residents. To some part, there is a marketing aspect in terms you've got restaurants and you've got stuff like activities, you've got museums, you've got attractions, theaters, whatever, that are also filled with residents. So the fact that that information is getting out to both visitor and residents is important. But a lot of the conversation with the residents isn't so much traditional selling them on serving them. It's actually kind of involving them in the process and letting them know what you do. So it's becoming aware of what's in your community, and as you build that brand, involving people in it, so you reflect kind of that whole community. The community kind of understands what you do, and then really kind of moves into inclusion of a whole bunch of different viewpoints, a whole bunch of different ideas, discovering even more about your community than you ever had. Again, interacting with people as you go along, bringing them into the conversation. And then I got a lovely chart up there somewhere, but really going to collaboration with your destination folks, and bringing them in, because at the end of the day, you want a visitor to come to your destination and interact with the people in your destination. One of the things I always loved about telling people about Chicago was that if you're looking for the next great thing, you want to go to Chicago, because the theater there, yeah, it may end up on Broadway, and you'll see the same show every night. But if you come in Chicago, they're watching you do it. You know, if you're at a restaurant, it's possible to go to a restaurant in Chicago and not interact with locals. It's impossible to wander around any of the tourism areas or non-tourism areas and not interact with locals. And that is part of that experience. So it's not so much, yes, you're serving your residents, but you're also kind of bringing them into the process. And that's actually the more important part. They need to understand why you're so important. And it goes beyond, like I said, the driving heads in beds. It's what people's impression is of your community. They need to understand that. Long Island, I think, did a really good approach in terms of spending a lot of time listening to people about what they liked about Long Island, what they were proud about Long Island, what they wanted, what they would show people if people came to Long Island. And it kind of shifted their brand and their marketing strategy away from describing Long Island as the beach community and to a much broader perspective. And that was driven by residents, and that involvement with residents has provided a lot of support for that organization and has allowed them to do certain things like, run multiple social channels. They've been able to pass a tourism improvement district. They've advanced well beyond what you would think an organization that size normally would do. So yeah, that's kind of a roundabout, long-winded way of saying it. Adam usually has a much shorter way of doing it and more direct.
So I've got, add to that, Jack, is that serving your visitors and serving your community are one and the same thing.
Right.
And so I think part of the task is helping to communicate from an economic standpoint how that is the case, and ensure that your residents appreciate that your visitors are the reasons that incomes and employment and the attractions and the amenities and the quality of life is what it is in your destination. And so yeah, there are of course places where there are issues with density and over tourism, but that's generally speaking, I think the bigger theme is that the inconveniences of visitors are greatly eclipsed by the benefits of them. And so serving those visitors is indeed serving your community and your residents, and so it's a communications challenge more than it is a tactics challenge.
Yeah, communications is key. This is where data plays a lot, showing that. There's also kind of a strategy point of view. I always like to talk about John Grow in Rockford. Not a lot of natural traditional tourism infrastructure, but what they've done is create events that locals want to go to, but then has the potential that visitors will want to join in. So they'll start an event that is 95% attended by locals, and 3 years later it's 75%, and you've got a 25% visitor impact, and that number kind of keeps shifting. That's a really good example of hitting both communities with something that both want. Yeah.
So earlier in the pandemic, there was a lot of talk about it's not just a matter of people wanting to travel again, but it's also a matter of the residents being ready to welcome that travel and embrace that travel in the communities. Do you have an update, or do you have a kind of anything as an indicator of where that sentiment is with residents, and are people ready to start welcoming people back at the rate that, you know, we talk about revenge travel? Are people ready for that?
First of all, I think Revenge Travel should be your band name. It's much better than the DI House Band. We've always looked for a good name. Revenge Travel, that should be it.
Done deal.
I know, I'm in.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to talk.
No, been on the name change. Yeah.
I'm curious, actually, I want to ask this, Adam, because it plays back to that. First of all, I do think resident sentiment and visitor sentiment are equally important. And the question of whether you feel it's safe to have visitors as well as you feel safe to visit a destination or go hand in hand. If any one of those is out of whack, you kind of have to look at your whole messaging and your whole efforts and your whole strategy to get them both in whack together. In terms of, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm sorry. What I don't know, and maybe Adam, you know something about this, it's probably going to take a while before people take multiple stop vacations. It seems like for the short term, going to a place and spending a week there or whatever seems more safe than going to multiple destinations. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Is that what you're seeing at all, Adam?
Well, yeah, I mean, that ties in with probably, you know, why international is going to take a while to come back, because those are the trips that usually involve multiple destinations in particular. But you know, the majority of domestic trips are single destination trips. So I'm not overly concerned with that. And then there are a number of itineraries that are absolutely auto trip itineraries that are popular, multi-trip. And so that as well, I wouldn't be too worried about that being slow to come back, because auto travel is already fully back to pre-pandemic levels according to Arrivalist. And what's interesting is that the latest Longwood survey is showing that the comfort level with traveling right now and the comfort level with receiving travelers in my community, they're moving up together at almost the exact same rate and the same proportions. So that's pretty encouraging that we're not seeing an imbalance between people's willingness to receive travelers and their eagerness to travel. They seem to be moving up at the same rate at around the same percentages. So I think we're, in that respect, going to be okay.
Keep an eye on things, but there is, according to the data I saw this morning, about 25% of the population who's still either hesitant or decided not to take the vaccine. In great part, they're also the same people who are not wearing the mask and stuff like that. They are the people who are not worried about travel. So I'm assuming they would answer the question, yes, we'll travel, and yes, I would invite people to come here. It's just something, I don't know how it all plays in or how to tap into it, but you know, I think as long as that exists out there, you're going to get something like Michigan, which all of a sudden you have to plop up. Until we get to some sort of herd immunity, I think you're going to see these one-offs where you're going to have to actually pay attention to the data, not just am I comfortable with travel, but actually what are the current rates going on there, and what is that portion of people who are not vaccinated or don't want to be vaccinated.
Interesting. Jack, we have another great question here in the Q&A. I wanted to make sure that we covered before we run out of time. It's from an anonymous attendee. It says, Jack, you brought up such an amazing point about event services being the first to come back and the need for them to return to our DMOs. How do you suggest we approach our executive leadership with the need for focusing recruitment efforts on services? Should we have the executive leadership call you directly, or?
Like I said, I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate mail. And just so people understand where I come from, Chicago, where I spent 18 years working for the convention center and another, 7 years working for the Bureau, was for a long time an expensive, hard to work city for meetings and conventions. So many assets there, the ability to get Chicago, that fabulous convention center they have, the central location, a lot of fabulous restaurants and off-site locations that can be used, but it was also expensive, and it was also, speaking of which, I have a Chicago reporter calling me. But it's also expensive, and it had lots of rules and regs that just made the hassle factor really large. What I've always thought kept Chicago in the ball game was part the assets it brought to the table, but also the fact that it had one of the best convention services programs out there. The easiest way to bring business in quicker, or to bring those people in that you have relationships with. Again, you're dealing with Zoom meetings, the point that Adam made earlier. The best way to connect through these type of meetings are to connect with those people you already know. I think if I was in the service division, I would be pulling together a strategic plan on how we're going to reach out to all those. And these are all the services that we have, including being the single source of information on all safety protocols and standards that exist within your community, who's open, who's not, being that source of information for everything about the destination, not just, where to have a meeting, but, what's the reliability of being able to hold a meeting. And these are the current, you still need to be 6 feet apart and stuff like that. Until all the destinations kind of get on the same page in terms of their health regulations and their protocols, I think that even drives services even more. And that's an easy way to make the case that information has always been the most powerful, widely traded commodity. And I think services is a way of offering that forward. That's my thoughts. Otherwise, just have your boss call me.
That's great. So we're getting down to the end of the session here. So if anybody else has any questions, please do hit it up in the chat window. But I'll kind of leave it with kind of a closing thoughts here for both Adam, Jack, and Gregg. Is if there's one kind of piece of advice that you would leave with everyone in the audience, from executives in terms of kind of building to team members in terms of kind of potentially repositioning their expertise and skill sets or career development in terms of education, what would you leave them with in terms of what to focus on to best prepare for this continued acceleration of the organization to kind of meet the needs of the communities that we all support in the coming years? If there's one thing to kind of leave everybody with here today. That's an easy question.
Well, I would say that, DMOs have the ultimate value proposition as an organization that generates economic impact. And so measuring and communicating that on a regular basis is really the avenue toward the success of the destination. In one sense, you have to be doing good work, but let's take that as a foregone conclusion that you're doing good work. You're essential to the recovery. Over a third of all jobs lost in the U.S. are in leisure and hospitality, as Jack mentioned. You don't get back economically until you get back to travel. So the value of a DMO has never been more important than it is right now. And so communicating that, and Alex, if I can take the liberty with an assist from Bruno Mars, this is what I think this is the opportunity here. Ready? If you find yourself home in the middle of a quarantine and your visitors are all gone and you're working all day on your marketing strategy, that everyone relies on. You've never been more vital to help restore your community. What your people need is a CDB to be there, inviting visitors back when you know it's safe. You'll do what it takes because you care, and that's what DMOs are made to do. That's all.
Wow, you went into the greatest hits for that one.
Yeah, I don't know how Jack kind of comes back after that one.
Not
But
sure.
I would like to maybe throw out there that although I think Revenge Travel is a wonderful name for your guys' band, I'm wondering if, you know, Ultimate Value Proposition, that seems like that potentially has some legs as well. So I'm not sure.
UVP?
UVP, that's a good one.
That's a good poll. Host and panelists cannot vote. Oh, that sucks. Hey, parting words though, I would urge all destination organizations to invest in their staff, whether it's education. I mean, that's the nice thing about all this online stuff is there's even more value out there that can focus on. And the data point that has caught my attention lately and that I've just kind of been buzzing around my head is, what is it, $1.6 trillion in extra savings that Americans have, which is bad news for credit cards since their balances are getting paid off, but and if they're your sponsors, there's raise a red flag there. But that's potential fuel to boon a real strong recovery.
I think I would jump in on something that's a little different. I've been thinking about this from more of a psychology perspective, and one of the things that I think DMOs are uniquely positioned to be able to do, I feel like there needs to be a certain amount of leadership from a psychology perspective to get some people going again and get them believing that we can do this. Because, you know, if you're watching, you know, news and you're keeping up with these things, and this has been a long lockdown, things have been going on that, you know, we've never experienced before. I think there's a lot of hesitancy. I think there's fear. I think there's a lot of things that could be helped and solved by some positive, welcoming leadership and things to just say, hey, it is okay to get back out here and do this. And when the time comes and when it's appropriate, I think, you know, the DMOs really could be that welcoming force that could lead that there's going to be a lot of people that I think need to get over that hump. Just, you know, and it's anecdotal, but, you know, talking to a lot of people and feeling sentiment out, you know, just in the streets of Philly, I feel like there's just that hurdle too, where there's a large section of people that are still, you know, they've got some fear and they've got some, you know, some things that they're, you know, reserved about. So, you know, moving forward, I just feel like being positive and really, you know, showing that leadership that, yes, we can get out here and we can do this, I think is going to be a critical piece as well.
I agree. It's a great opportunity for destination organizations to step into.
Yeah, the future is definitely bright. There's a very, very bright light at the end of this tunnel. You know, we've been very, I guess, cautiously optimistic for so long. I feel like now is the time to really be looking forward. We're not through it yet, the tunnel, and that's important to also understand, but we are very, very close. I wanted to say very personally, thank you so much, Jack and Adam. That was tremendous. If anyone wants a copy of this, we'll go ahead and kind of edit the video up and make this available probably tomorrow, no later than tomorrow. And if anyone else has any questions or follow-up, please let us know. And I think it looks like Revenge Travel has won, although maybe we should keep this poll up throughout the day. We are right at 11, so we'll probably wait about 5 minutes to start the next session. So it'll be about 5 minutes later, which I think is fine, because there's a break after that. And we'll see everybody soon in a couple minutes. Thank you so much. Thanks, Adam. Thanks, Jack. Thanks, Greg.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity. It was fun.
All right, talk to you guys soon.
Thank you, everyone.